In the 13th century, a formidable force arose on the Mongolian steppe, led by Genghis Khan. Mobilizing his people for relentless warfare, Genghis Khan carved out a colossal empire, reshaping the world order. Upon his death in 1227, his successors continued his relentless mission of global conquest. Their campaigns left an indelible scar on history, marked by unparalleled slaughter, widespread destruction, and unbridled savagery. While incursions into the Middle East nearly resulted in the extermination of Muslim communities, incursions into Europe extended as far as Poland, Hungary, and the Balkans. The Mamluk Sultanate currently serves as Islam's last line of defense against the terrifying Mongol invasion. The fight that will alter the path of history is almost upon us. So get ready to march with us in the decisive battle of Ain Jalut that saved Islam and stopped Mongol. The Mamluks were a caste of warriors from Egypt who were originally slaves. They were trained as skilled fighters from an early age and formed the military elite of the Ayyubid Sultanate of Egypt and Syria. Their strength increased throughout time, and in 1250, they deposed the Ayyubids to establish the Mamluk Sultanate. A decade later, during the sweltering summer of 1260, Cairo shone like a brilliant jewel on the banks of the River Nile. The people of the city went about their everyday lives, not realizing that Sultan Saif al-Din Qutuz and his generals were concentrating all of their attention on 4 Mongol envoys inside the palace. They brought with them a letter bearing an explicit command on behalf of Hulagu Khan. In summary, if Qutuz refused to surrender to Mongol authority, the Khan threatened to destroy all mosques and slaughter all Muslim children. The envoys and the Sultan exchanged silent glances for a while. The Mongols smirked confidently as Qutuz retired to confer with his generals. High-ranking officers soberly warned Qutuz of the Mongol advance into the Middle East during the hurriedly convened Council of War. For 35 years, the unstoppable Mongol onslaught devastated the Islamic world, leaving a trail of ruined towns and people either massacred or enslaved. Hulagu, under orders from his brother, the great Khan Möngke, Genghis Khan's grandson, was tasked with conquering the last Islamic nations in the Middle East and North Africa. This command came with control of what many believe was the largest and most powerful army the Mongols had ever assembled. The fate of entire civilizations hung in the balance as Hulagu's forces advanced, embodying the terrifying might of the Mongol Empire. The fate of entire civilizations hung in the balance as Hulagu's forces advanced, embodying the terrifying might of the Mongol Empire. In 1258, the Mongols marched on Baghdad with a massive force of 150,000 soldiers organized into 15 tumans. Despite no longer being the political heart of the Islamic world, Baghdad, under the Abbasid Caliphate, remained its intellectual center. By February, the Mongols exploited betrayal within the Abbasid court and the Caliph's strategic blunders. They launched a relentless assault, capturing Baghdad, a city home to 1 million people. The city's defenses crumbled under the Mongol siege tactics and overwhelming numbers. The Grand Library of Baghdad went up in flames, marking the beginning of a horrific onslaught. Countless lives were lost as people were either brutally executed or sold off as slaves. The city itself was ravaged and reduced to ashes, with the invaders showing no mercy. Alongside the destruction of homes and buildings, the intricate irrigation systems essential for agriculture were deliberately demolished. The devastation was so extensive that it would take centuries for the land to heal and for agriculture to regain its former productivity. The aftermath left a scar on the region's history, forever altering its landscape and leaving generations to rebuild from the ashes of their once thriving civilization. A year later, with the aftermath of Baghdad's fall still echoing across the Islamic world, Hulagu dispatched a detachment of 6 tumans, or 60,000 troops, into Syria. The Mongol advance was terrifying in its pace. The Mongols arrived at Aleppo's gates in January 1260. After 6 days, the walls were breached with the use of mangonels and catapults. The Mongols were accompanied in their invasion of the city by their vassal armies of Frankish and Armenians. In the subsequent massacre, all Muslim and Jewish men were killed, while the majority of women and children were taken to the slave markets. The Prince of Antioch and Tripoli, as well as the Christian king of Cilician Armenia, received rich rewards for their participation in the city's sacking. Late March saw the surrender of the remainder of Syria, upon learning of the terrible tragedy that befell Aleppo. Now, after the great Muslim cities had been destroyed, the Mamluk Sultanate stood as the final authentic bastion of Islam. Egypt was the Mongols' next objective. Mamluk leaders back in Cairo concluded it would be prudent to yield to Mongol demands. Qutuz thought otherwise. Although he admitted that the Mamluks faced impossible odds against the vast Mongol army, he was a proud and strong-willed leader. To submit would be an act of cowardice. "A warrior needs to be Egypt's king," he cried out. "If nobody else shows up, I'll go fight the Tatar by myself." The Sultan then gave the order to have the envoys apprehended, chopped in half at the waist, beheaded, and have their heads put on display at Cairo's commanding Zuwila Gate. Hulagu received an unchangeable message from Qutuz that the Mamluks will not submit to the invader. The Khan was infuriated by the envoys' deaths, and plans for a full-scale conflict were immediately made. Qutuz had a difficult task ahead of him. Clearly, he was outnumbered. There were 24 districts under the Mamluk Sultanate, each responsible for providing 1,000 men. This meant that there were a total of 24,000 Mamluk cavalry, comprising 4,000 royal Mamluks, 10,000 emirs Mamluks, and 10,000 additional regular troops from other backgrounds. Hulagu, meantime, had 60,000 soldiers throughout Syria. Still, Qutuz started making defensive plans. Most significantly, he could get the support of one of the greatest military leaders of his era, Baybars, his rival, pledging to hand over Aleppo to him after the war. Baybars was of Turkic origin, either a Kipchak or a Cuman. He belonged to the Bali tribe, which inhabited the region north of the Black Sea. When the Mongols invaded Europe as a young boy, he was taken as a slave and then sold to the Ayyubid Sultan of Egypt and Syria. He received an education in Cairo that followed the Mamluk Furusiya code. He underwent years of extensive military training and received an excellent education. Baybars shown outstanding military skill even as a young boy, and after finishing his training, he became the commander of a select squad of the Sultan's personal bodyguards. During the Seventh Crusade, he distinguished himself in combat and, with Qutuz, was one of the leaders who routed the Crusader army at the Battle of Al-Mansura in 1250, where King Louis IX was captured. Baybars was invited by Sultan Qutuz to head the elite Mamluk vanguard against the Mongols following the fall of Damascus in 1260. Word came to Qutuz that Hulagu had rescheduled the war against Egypt and withdrawn most of his men east, while defensive preparations were on in Egypt. The death of the great Khan Möngke prompted Hulagu to return to Karakorum for the election of the new great Khan. Hulagu left Kitbuka, his dependable lieutenant, in charge of protecting Syria until he came back to resume the fight against Egypt. Now the governor of Aleppo, Kitbuka was granted leadership of 1 Tumen, or 10,000 soldiers, with the addition of 2,000 more soldiers from Cilician Armenians, Georgians, the Aleppo army, and locally recruited nomads. Kitbuka's total force grew to approximately 12,000 soldiers. Palestine could not support an army of more than 15,000 soldiers for an extended length of time, as Hulagu accurately predicted. It was also suggested by intelligence obtained from both ally and captive soldiers that the Mamluks would only be able to muster a force of 15,000 soldiers in Palestine. As Qutuz planned an offensive, he gathered 14,000 of his finest Mamluks, comprising Bedouins, Turkoman Mamluks, Mongolian deserters, and members of the Hawara tribe from Libya. He also assigned 10,000 warriors to remain behind and protect Egypt from a potential Christian invasion. In late July, Baybars was the first to depart Cairo, leading a sizable vanguard contingent that marched in force to take Gaza. The withdrawal of Hulagu's main army presented a chance for both Qutuz and Baybars to assault the Mongol rearguard. Qutuz urged Latin crusaders to join him in urgent letters. Fearing excommunication and Mongol retaliation, however, the Crusaders chose to use the middle ground, providing the Mamluk army with safe passage and enabling them to make supplies purchases as they passed through Christian territory. Kitbuka advanced to confront the Islamic army as soon as he received word of the enemy's impending arrival. He intended to intercept the Sultan after learning that Qutuz would be passing through Christian territory. In the meantime, Qutuz arrived in Acre and set up camp outside the city to buy supplies for his soldiers. After learning of the Mamluk army's size and location from Mongol spies, Kitbuka accelerated his advance in an attempt to take the Muslims by surprise. Along the eastern shore of Lake Tiberias marched the Mongols. Once they passed the lake, they crossed the River Jordan and proceeded west towards the Spring of Goliath, where, according to legend, David slew Goliath. In an attempt to surprise and intercept the Mamluks, the Mongols forcefully marched in two columns. Cilician, Armenian, and Frankish troops were placed in the vanguard because they knew the terrain and could guide the rest of the army. The hills of Galilee to the north and Mount Gilboa to the south encircled the Jezreel Valley. The troop of Baibars surprised the Mongol army as they crossed the Jordan River. Abrupt bursts of Mamluk arrows initiated the combat. The Christian heavy cavalry advanced to get closer. Baibars was a surprise to the Mongols. He was aware of the terrain, just like the Crusaders who led the enemy's vanguard. He skillfully maneuvered his forces to launch a surprise attack while dodging Mongol scouts. As soon as the Cilician armored cavalry made contact with the Muslim formation, it broke. Just as the Mamluks were being driven back, a conflict broke out that appeared to be chaotic. The fighting was taking place behind a gentle ridge that ran north-south, blocking Kitbuka's line of sight. Unable to confirm the number of Mamluk troops stationed beyond the ridge, Kitbuka sent additional troops to support the Christian charge and gave the order for the remaining troops to form the battle lines. The Mamluk vanguard is able to hold back the entire Mongol army with a significantly smaller force, thanks to Baibar's outstanding leadership. The Mamluk vanguard rotates between intense, brief hand-to-hand clashes, short retreats, and arrow volleys. Baibar's discipline keeps the Mamluk vanguard in check while the enemy gradually gains ground. As he circled the mountain slopes, the Mamluk commander maintained a fighting retreat under mounting Mongol pressure, despite suffering significant losses. It is said that Baibar's soldiers fired early handguns at the enemy. These weapons, while very inaccurate, however, did a great job of frightening Mongol horses, which hindered and slowed their approach and sent some of the animals racing off the field with their riders in fear. Exhaustion struck after hours of repelling the overwhelming Mongol attack, and Baibar's group started suffering significant losses. However, it was clearly evident that his group was merely a component of the Mamluk army. Watching from the nearby hills and concealed by the trees, Kutuz bided his time till the enemy approached him. Seeing the Mongols pushing Baibar's back, Kutuz bolstered the morale of his troops with a rousing speech, which historians say elicited tears from the eyes of his soldiers, and he reminded them of the Mongol savagery, saying, "There is no alternative to fighting except a horrible death for all of you, your wives, and your children." In response, Kitbuka ordered an all-out charge, determined to crush Baibar's vanguard before it could regroup with the main Mamluk force. But Kutuz, refusing to let despair take hold, commanded his right flank to burst out from the tree line and attack the Mongol left with ferocity. Realizing he was now encircled on three sides, Kitbuka ordered his troops to execute a charge, shoot, and breakaway, hoping to bait the Mamluks into a reckless chase. But Baibars and Kutuz recognized the feigned retreat ruse. They gave the orders for the men to remain where they were and launch their arrows at the enemy. Kitbuka immediately adjusted after realizing that Mamluk bows and arrows are far more lethal at longer ranges, and that the pretended retreat was ineffective. While directing the remaining soldiers to form ranks and hold against the Mamluk center and right flank, he gave the order for the majority of his cavalry to swing across the valley and charge the Mamluk left flank. His strategy called for mounting a mass attack on the sloping hill in order to envelop their army and destroy the Mamluk left flank. They were in danger straight away when the Mongol charge hit Kutuz's left flank. The Mongols advanced the Muslim line by overrunning the flank. Kutuz hurried to support his troops on the left after ordering a detachment of soldiers to follow him, since he saw that his left flank was about to collapse. After his valiant withdrawal, Baibars strengthened his positions in the middle and started driving the Christian heavy cavalry back. The Mamluk and Crusader armies engaged in fierce hand-to-hand fighting in the center, where the fighting was most bloody. Leading his force directly from the front, Baibars commanded his men to repel the enemy and protect their nation. Mamluk's left flank, however, was in terrible condition. Sections of the Mamluk line buckled under the brutal Mongol onslaught, with some troops breaking ranks and fleeing. As the left flank crumbled, the Mongols saw an opportunity to rout and encircle the Mamluks. Kutuz, galloping up the hill, shouted for his men to stand their ground and fight. In a dramatic gesture, he removed his helmet so his soldiers could see him and recognize his leadership. "O Islam!" he cried out 3 times, charging into the Mongol line with his personal guard. This bold act of courage electrified the Mamluk troops, who rallied around their sultan. With renewed vigor, they fought back fiercely, managing to slow the Mongol advance. Another hour of intense combat saw the Mongol momentum wane as Kutuz stabilized the left flank. Kitbuka now faced a dire situation. His attempt to break through the Mamluk left had stalled, leaving his position dangerously exposed. He had committed his last reserves to counter Baybar's central assault, leaving no reinforcements. Sensing the pivotal moment, Baybars quickly sent urgent messages to the right flank, ordering them to launch an all-out assault on the Mongols. His goal was clear: to encircle and crush the enemy from the right. The battlefield crackled with tension as both sides fought with desperate intensity, the fate of the battle hanging in the balance. As the battle raged on, reinforcements poured into the Mamluk left flank, and Kutuz finally began to turn the tide. The Mongols, less adept at close combat, struggled against the fierce determination of the Muslim cavalry. Despite their numerical superiority, the Mongol forces started to falter and retreat. Kitbuka's other flank also began to crumble, and the threat of being completely encircled became imminent. One of Kitbuka's officers suggested a retreat, but Kitbuka, with unwavering resolve, declared, "We must die here, and that is the end of it. Long life and happiness to the Khan." With these words, he joined the fray, his presence bolstering the morale of his troops. The Mongol soldiers, inspired by their commander's bravery, fought with renewed vigor. However, the Mamluks' tactical maneuvers proved overwhelming, and amidst the chaos, Baybar's troops captured Kitbuka. Seeing their leader fall into enemy hands shattered the remaining Mongol forces. Realizing the battle was lost, Kitbuka's troops began to break and retreat towards Beit Shean. The Muslim army secured a monumental victory at Ain Jalut, halting the westward expansion of the Mongols. This victory not only safeguarded the 3 holiest cities in Islam, Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. Kutuz became the savior of Islam, and, undoubtedly, he saved his Christian enemies in the west from the Devil's Horsemen, a name attributed to the Mongols. Had the Mongols succeeded in conquering Egypt, they would have opened a path across North Africa to the Strait of Gibraltar. This would have allowed them to encircle Europe and launch invasions from multiple fronts, overwhelming any European defense. Kutuz's leadership at Ain Jalut thus became a crucial turning point, saving both the Islamic and Christian worlds from the Mongol threat. Kutuz, celebrated as the Lion of Ain Jalut, tragically did not live to revel in his victory. Just days after the decisive battle, while the triumphant army was en route to Cairo, he was assassinated. Kutuz had made many enemies and rivals, especially within the Aybak faction. His most formidable adversary was Baybars, a powerful member of the Bari faction. Rumors suggest that Baybars orchestrated the assassination in retaliation because Kutuz had broken his promise to grant Baybars control over Aleppo, fearing his rival's growing power and ambition. As the army returned to Cairo, still basking in the glow of their victory, Baybars seized the moment and became the new Mamluk Sultan. Under his rule, Baybars proved to be as formidable and capable as Kutuz, maintaining and strengthening the Mamluk traditions. The aftermath of the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260 was a watershed moment in medieval history, dramatically altering the balance of power in the Middle East and beyond. This pivotal clash between the Mamluks of Egypt and the Mongols under Hulagu Khan not only halted the Mongol advance, but also reshaped military strategies and political alliances for decades to come. Following Ain Jalut, the Mamluks engaged in several battles to consolidate their power and fend off external threats. In December in 1260, they successfully repelled another Mongol invasion at the Battle of Homs. This victory further cemented their dominance and deterred future Mongol attempts to penetrate the region. The Mamluks also turned their attention to internal consolidation and expansion. Baybars, who became sultan after Kutuz's assassination, launched campaigns to secure Mamluk control over the Crusader states in the Levant. He captured key fortresses such as Antioch in 1268 and Crac de Chevalier in 1271, reducing the Crusader presence and securing the coastal regions. Additionally, the Mamluks fortified their borders and established a formidable military infrastructure to defend against future invasions. They built a network of forts, watchtowers, and garrisons, ensuring that they were prepared for any external threats. Their military innovations and strategic planning influenced warfare in the region for centuries. Globally, the victory at Ain Jalut had far-reaching consequences. It halted Mongol expansion into Africa and Europe, influencing the geopolitical balance of power. The defeat compelled the Mongols to focus on consolidating their gains in Asia, rather than pursuing further conquests westward. See you in the next battle video. Leave in the comment the battle that you want us to go in depth. Please hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you for watching.